Hey there, Manhwa lovers! Today, we're recapping a story called Her Lies. Please like this video and subscribe. It helps us a lot. Sheila Godwin knelt before her lady, crying, and her lady asked her, with a whip in hand, if she had thought it through. At the corner of the room, a man's legs had been cut off, and he was crying in pain. "Your father's life or death?" her lady asked. Sheila kept crying. Hearing that her father's life was entirely in her hands, she trembled in fear, then suddenly spoke with forced confidence. "I'll marry Duke Ralph Alcott in place of the young lady and be his fourth wife," she shouted through her tears. A few days earlier, Sheila had been slapped by her father, and she fell to the ground holding her cheeks. He called her useless, and when she glared at him, he shouted at her not to look at him like that. He said if it weren't for the good price she would bring him, she wouldn't even be alive. He yelled at her to get out and bring him wine, and she left angrily. She shut the door behind her and stepped into the street. There were many people outside. Still angry about being hit, her attention shifted when she heard people loudly gossiping about the Priestley family. They said the Priestley family had one unmarried daughter, and now the Priestley and Alcott families were getting married. According to them, Clara Priestley was known as the Ruby. They pitied her for being so beautiful yet having to marry an old man who had already been married 3 times. Just then, some guards pushed Sheila aside, telling her to make way. They walked through the crowd, pushing people out of the road, and everyone became frightened. A woman stepped forward and shouted at the gossiping women, asking how they dared to speak so disrespectfully about the eldest daughter of the Priestley family. She ordered that all of them should be taken away and dealt with properly. They were immediately grabbed, and they begged, denying that they had said anything at all. The woman then ordered the guards to continue looking for the red-haired girl with red eyes and bring her to the young lady under the excuse of hiring her. The guards bowed and left. Sheila, who was hiding at the corner, wondered what was going on as she heard them talking about a girl with the Priestley family hallmarks, red hair and red eyes. Sheila stood there, also wondering what they wanted with such a girl, forgetting that she herself had red eyes. Before she even realized it, it was she who was brought before her lady. Clara, with the whip in hand, told her that if she agreed to marry the Duke in her place, her father would not have to suffer like this. She leaned closer with a smirk and told her she should be thankful for having a face like hers. If she did not resemble her, there was no way she would ever get such an offer to escape the slums. But because of that resemblance, she was being given the chance to become a young lady of the Priestley family. Her red eyes were acceptable, but the only problem was her hair. Suddenly, Clara grabbed her hair and Sheila screamed. Clara ordered that her hair be dyed to match the family's signature color. She pushed Sheila aside and the maids quickly obeyed. Sheila knelt there miserably as they brought out the dye. They pulled at her hair, telling her that from now on, she would be monitored by Molly. Her hair was dyed and trimmed. Clara ordered her to behave, to stay alert, and never let anyone discover that she was fake. "If they find out, you will die," Clara said coldly. Her expression was so threatening that Sheila quickly agreed and said she would keep it a secret. When everything was done, Clara reminded her again to remember every single thing she had been told. She explained that Duke Ralph Alcott was a lustful old man with countless illegitimate children. Only his 3 sons and 1 daughter from his 3 first wives lived with him. The most dangerous of them was Ulysses Alcott. He was a devilish man with a mind no one could understand. His insight was sharp, and he enjoyed playing with people's hearts. Clara warned Sheila to avoid him at all costs. If Ulysses noticed her, he would torment her until she wished she were dead. Sheila spoke up, saying Clara seemed to know a lot about the Alcott family. Clara turned to her angrily and said she knew everything. Then she smiled and said the family was basically a pit of fire, full of power struggles and cruelty. But now it's you, Clara Priestley, who will take my place and jump into that pit of fire, she said. She ordered the maids to change Sheila's clothes and sent her to the Alcott territory immediately. As Sheila was being dragged away, she begged Clara to keep her promise and let her father live. Clara assured her that as long as she obeyed, her father would live well, at least until Clara decided to end his life with her own hands. As the carriage was leaving, Molly told Sheila that everything would be under her control. She reminded her that she was only a maid who washed the young lady's feet and that she should not try anything foolish or think of betraying the Priestley family. Sheila, who had been quiet all along, suddenly turned cold. "So, when I enter the Alcott territory, should I step in with my left foot or my right foot?" she asked mockingly. "Should I ask you that too?" Molly shouted, asking if Sheila had just talked back to her. She raised her hand to slap her, but Sheila caught her wrist in time. She looked at Molly coldly and said, "That poor girl who was nothing and couldn't even dream of entering the Alcott territory is gone. She has lost her name. From now on, I am Clara Priestley, the young lady of the Priestley family." "That's it. I knew from the start that those glares were of a tough girl." Molly was shocked. She said it was obvious that Sheila had been faking her weakness all along. Sheila sighed and replied that it took a lot of effort to act like that, but it was worth it. Now she could finally say goodbye to the slums. Her new life had just begun. OMG, I must say, this girl's a very good actress because, girl, you ate. Sheila was still on the journey when she stretched tiredly, complaining that she had been on the road for several days and nights and was completely exhausted. She glanced at Molly, who was groaning at the corner, tied up tightly with her mouth covered, so she could not even speak to vent her anger. Sheila told her not to waste her energy because she would be released only when she agreed to treat her like the real Miss Clara and also swear that she would not tell Lady Clara the truth. Molly was already ready to accept the conditions, and Sheila sighed, saying that meant she would have to stay tied for now. Molly kept struggling, but Sheila ignored her and instead opened the map. The Alcott family ruled over Blizzard City, the northernmost and coldest land in the kingdom of Hisar. The people there were known for their savagery and violence, and it was said they were extremely difficult to get along with. Even more terrifying was the lord she was about to marry, Duke Ralph Alcott, a lecherous old man who had married 3 young and beautiful wives, but all of them died under mysterious circumstances. Those wives left behind many children who constantly schemed and plotted against each other, using any means necessary in their struggle for power. Sheila knew Clara Priestley was right. The whole of Blizzard City was a giant pit of fire waiting for her to jump into. She closed the map in annoyance, thinking to herself that she had gone through so much just to escape her foster father and come here. Obviously, it was not to die. She actually had it all planned. She had secretly gotten medicine from a mage, which she was told was strong enough to kill dozens of rats. So, if she could find a chance to feed the Duke this poison on their wedding night, she could avoid humiliation and become a widow instead. Just imagining such a perfect beginning made her whole face light up, leaving Molly confused and wondering if she was even mentally all right. Just then, Sheila heard her name being called. The carriage rider informed her excitedly that they were almost at Blizzard City. As they approached the castle, she immediately looked out of the window and was stunned. Before her stood a white and gold mansion, beautifully designed and shining in the snow. Her eyes lit up and she exclaimed that she must do her best to welcome her new life. Unfortunately, at that very moment, the carriage suddenly lost balance and slipped. They all fell into a deep hole. When Sheila opened her eyes, she felt a cold run down her spine. She looked around, confused, and realized that everyone else in the carriage looked dead. She quickly wrapped her wounds, even though it hurt badly. One glance at the others was enough to tell that they were all dead. She felt relieved about Molly's death. At least that annoying woman would no longer burden her. But then she sighed bitterly. With her injured legs, there was no way she could climb out of such a deep hole. The place was completely deserted. Even if she shouted for help, it might take forever for anyone to hear her. Worse, shouting might even cause the snow cave to collapse. She wondered if she should just sit there and wait to die? No, Sheila said to herself, and stood up immediately. She told herself she could not give up. Even if she was going to die, she would delay it until the very end. She picked up the writer's jacket and wore it. Then she removed Molly's cover, saying clothes were useless to the dead, so she would take it as her last act of loyalty. After covering herself, she tried hard not to fall asleep. She knew that if she slept, it would be the end. But just as she was about to pass out, she saw someone coming down with a rope, moving so gracefully that she wondered if it was an angel. The person walked up to her and lightly slapped her cheeks, telling her not to fall asleep. She couldn't hold on anymore and collapsed into his arms, thanking God that she was saved. The man was surprised. When he noticed she had passed out, he held her tightly, carried her properly in his arms, and took her away from the hole. Clara suddenly found herself in a warm place. A young man was close to her, being intimate, and she was enjoying it until he suddenly became rough. Her eyes widened, and she asked who he was, but he ignored her. She begged to see him clearly, and finally, when she saw his face, he was extremely handsome. Clara opened her eyes at once, and everything returned to normal. She was in the arms of the man who had saved her. It was the same man she had just imagined being with. He asked if she was awake, and she freaked out. She thought to herself how warm it was. Despite the ice and snow, a handsome man had appeared out of nowhere, and she had experienced a strange feeling she had never felt before. She quickly ran away from him, saying she must have gone straight to heaven after all the suffering she went through. The man replied calmly that she was not in heaven, she had just fainted from hypothermia. Hearing that, she was surprised, and everything suddenly made sense. What she experienced was not real, just her imagination while she was unconscious. She felt embarrassed and then smiled, thanking him for saving her. He asked her name and where she was from. She smiled and introduced herself. "I'm Clara Priestley from Lanesburg in the South." "The Miss Clara who is supposed to marry Duke Alcott of Blizzard City?" he asked. She was shocked and asked who he was. He smiled and said, "I'm Ulysses Alcott, the Duke's second son." Oh my, she just met the wrong person. Immediately, Sheila remembered what the real Clara had told her, never to cross paths with Ulysses or he would make her life worse than hell until she died. The thought of being tortured by him terrified her. She glared at him, thinking that the real Clara would never lie just to scare her. From everything she had heard, Ulysses was clearly not a good person. She wondered if it was just a coincidence that he appeared here, or if he actually was the one behind the snow accident that almost killed her. The place became silent, and Ulysses called her name. She snapped out of her thoughts and smiled brightly. "So, you're Ulysses Alcott. I'm so lucky to meet you here. Now I can safely reach Blizzard City and marry the Duke," she said with a big smile. Ulysses looked at her and asked if you really want to marry my father. She sighed and said, "Of course, that was the only reason I came, to marry the Duke. I desired nothing else." "You desire nothing else," Ulysses repeated. He reached for her chin, saying he doubted that. Before she could react, he suddenly grabbed her neck and said coldly, "You are an imposter." Sheila was shocked. This is getting really interesting. How did he even find out? Sheila wondered how she had already been exposed even before reaching the castle. Ulysses told her not to bother asking what made him suspicious. He said she should not even think of continuing the act because no matter what she did, he would never believe her, so she might as well give up. He was holding her neck so tightly that she could barely breathe. Sheila could not help thinking to herself that he was truly a devilish man. How could someone see through her so easily? She struggled in his grip and asked what he was going to do with her now. Ulysses finally let go of her and she fell to the ground, gasping for breath. He coldly told her to get lost when morning came, return to Lanesburg, and never set foot in Blizzard City again. Sheila looked at him in shock and asked why he wasn't ending her life right there. He paused, then glanced back at her and said that if that was what she wanted, he could actually grant her wish. She fell silent. At that moment, she didn't even know what to say or what to do. She lowered her head sadly and watched him walk away. But she could only think of one thing. Before he could go far, she suddenly ran after him and hugged him tightly from behind. "I'm not leaving," she said. Ulysses was stunned. She held onto him firmly and said she was not going anywhere. She would stay and live with him. A few days earlier, in Blizzard City at the Alcott estate, Ulysses had been sleeping on his bed when he suddenly opened his eyes wide and sat up, sweating heavily. He looked at his trembling hands in confusion, wondering what was happening. He clearly remembered dying from a terrible illness, so why was he still alive? Just then, a voice came from outside the door calling his name. He asked what it was. The servant told him that Miss Clara, who had traveled all the way from Lion City, would be arriving. His Highness wanted Ulysses to arrange a welcoming banquet for her. Hearing that, Ulysses was completely shocked. That was when he realized something unbelievable. He had been reborn at the age of 20. What the hell? So Ulysses was able to tell she's an imposter because he has lived this life before? That's crazy. Ulysses' mother was the Duke of Alcott's second wife. She came from a fallen noble family called the Elkins. Sadly, she died not long after giving birth to Ulysses. After her death, the Elkins family was too weak to take care of him. The Duke of Alcott soon turned his attention to his new and younger wife, completely neglecting Ulysses. He grew up like a ghost in the family. Fortunately, Ulysses was intelligent and patient. He taught himself many things and trained hard in swordsmanship and martial arts. Over time, he successfully established his own position in Blizzard City. In the years that followed, Ulysses and his siblings secretly plotted to seize the position of family head. Everything in his previous life was going exactly as he planned. Then, Clara Priestley appeared and ruined everything. When she first married into the family, she went crazy trying to escape and get a divorce. After failing many times, she finally accepted her fate and chose to join the family power struggle. She used her youth and beauty to please his father. She even tried to use Ulysses to become the de facto ruler of all Blizzard City. In the end, she was no different from the others who desired the Alcott head position. She died by Ulysses' sword. But before dying, she dealt him a huge blow. Because of her, he was struck by a terrible illness and died at only 40 years old. This time, with his second chance at life, Ulysses swore to himself that he would never allow Clara Priestley to step into Blizzard City again, not alive. Yet, here she was, clinging to him and begging to stay. Anyone in their right senses wouldn't allow her or get tricked again because she's literally the reason he died. "Live with me?" Ulysses repeated. She nodded and said she had heard of his reputation back in Lion City and admired him for a long time. She claimed it was because of him that she agreed to the marriage in the first place. Now she was all alone. This lady is really so good at lying. Ulysses immediately pushed her away and asked why she was still refusing to admit that she was an imposter. Sheila asked what proof he had that she was an imposter. Ulysses could not help thinking to himself that she was really a handful and that he should have just let her die in that snow cave. He walked closer to her and asked calmly if she liked him that much. He even said if he told her the snow cave had been prepared in advance just for her, would she still cling to him like this? Sheila froze, so he really was the one behind it. Then she asked him why he saved her. Was it because, in the end, he could not bear to watch her die? Ulysses went silent. He reached out and touched her cheek, thinking to himself that this was not Clara. He could not just take her life like that. He could not believe he was actually feeling soft-hearted. It annoyed him. Ulysses lifted her chin and smiled faintly. "If you're this confident, then I assume you're also prepared to offer your body. Why don't I start enjoying it right now?" Sheila was shocked when she realized he was holding her waist. Ulysses only meant to scare her so she would back off, but Sheila thought to herself that she had grown up in the slums and had never been this close to any man before, especially not someone with such a dangerous reputation. She was nervous and wanted to pull away, but there was no turning back now. No matter what it cost, she had to stay in Blizzard City and live a better life. She shyly pulled away and said that she had admired him for a long time, and of course she should welcome his advances. But if she entered Blizzard City and Duke Alcott discovered she was no longer a virgin, it would cause trouble. Ulysses glared at her. Before she could react, he grabbed her shoulders and pulled her close. "I'm not afraid of trouble," he said. "I just want to see how long you'll keep acting tough." She couldn't believe it. Even after everything, this man still wanted to make a move on his future stepmother? She had no choice but to think of him as a pervert. Ulysses threw off her jacket, and she panicked, shouting for him to wait. He asked what was wrong, and if she was already regretting it. She turned her face away and said it was freezing, and that it would be better if they went somewhere else. His grip loosened slightly. He suddenly remembered the first time he saw her, when she fainted into his arms. Her hands were full of calluses. That was when he realized she was not the real Clara. At best, she was a maid or a commoner forced into this role by the Priestley family. He had wanted to send her away the moment she woke up. Blizzard City was a death trap, and someone like her would never survive here. Yet, he still saved her. Ulysses finally understood. No matter what he said, she would not leave. He stepped back and said coldly, that I don't care anymore. Just treat the snow cave incident as an accident and do whatever you want." Sheila was confused. She immediately ran after him and asked him to wait. He told her not to follow him. She smiled and replied, "I'm not following you. We're just going in the same direction. We're both heading to Blizzard City." This woman just wants trouble so bad. Along the way, she struggled to keep up with his pace. She was already exhausted and knew that if she continued like this, she would be left behind. So she suddenly shouted, "Lord Ulysses!" He turned around just in time to see her fall at his feet, hugging his leg. She begged him not to leave her and to take her along to Blizzard City. "You're my only lifeline. I won't let go even if I die." He tried to shake her off and told her to let go. "Are you going to let go or not?" he asked seriously. She shook her head. "If I die by your hands, then I accept my fate." Ulysses sighed angrily. He wondered where on earth his brother found such a shameless person. She was like gum that would not come off no matter how hard he tried. In the end, he had no choice but to agree to take her along. She smiled weakly and said she had no strength left. Before she knew it, Ulysses grabbed her clothes and lifted her onto his shoulder. She was shocked. She said she was tired. How else did she think he would carry her? Ulysses asked if she remembered what she was supposed to say when they reached the city. She nodded and replied, "My carriage had an accident on the road, and I was lucky enough to be rescued by Lord Ulysses, who was passing by." He smiled faintly and said she was at least smart, but if she ever got in his way, he would not be too late to get rid of her. Later that night, they finally arrived at the Alcott estate. The guards bowed at the gate. Sheila asked them to inform the Duke that Miss Clara Priestley had arrived. As she entered, all the guards made way for her. She followed behind Ulysses, and whispers filled the hall. One of them was Eunice, the Duke's eldest daughter. She mocked that Lion City was wealthy, so why was the Priestley family's daughter dressed like a beggar? The Duke's eldest son, Eugene, told his sister not to speak so rudely. The third son, who looked the youngest, remained silent. On the other side, Duke Alcott was sitting comfortably while his wife fed him with her own hands. Sheila glared, thinking to herself that he really was a lecherous old man. Ulysses called out to his father. The Duke finally looked at them. Ulysses said, "Clara Priestley pays her respects." Sheila immediately bowed. "Clara Priestley," the Duke repeated, smiling. Then he pointed at his lap. "Come and sit here." Oh, wow, so this foolish man really expects her to sit on his lap the moment she arrives, and right in front of everyone? On seeing this, Eugene could not help feeling sorry for Lady Clara, who was facing such a situation immediately after arriving in the city. Eunice smirked and said she hoped Clara wouldn't end up crying like the last stepmother when she first came. When the youngest noticed everyone looking, they all cleared their throats. Eunice asked why he was looking at her as if she was wrong. He quickly apologized and said it was nothing. Ulysses could not help thinking to himself that it seems Eunice was already excited to watch the show, but too bad for her because he was sure this fake Clara was going to disappoint her expectations. Clara stood there stunned when Ulysses suddenly turned away coldly and left. The Duke frowned and asked why she was suddenly spacing out. Sheila looked at him, bowed again, and said, "It was truly an honor to be invited into such a lavish place." She said she had been momentarily stunned and might have acted rude, so he should forgive her. Everyone was shocked, including the youngest. Ulysses was not surprised at all. He had already seen this coming. He knew she was not scared. The Duke laughed and said if she was sorry, then she should hurry up and come over. Sheila walked forward confidently and sat on his lap. The Duke smiled faintly and said she really had a sweet mouth. Sheila smiled back and said she truly meant every word. The Duke's hand slowly moved toward her body, but she suddenly pushed him away in panic, which made her fall off his lap. Eugene mumbled that she was obviously faking her composure earlier and couldn't keep it up anymore. Eunice sighed and said offending our father on the first day meant she was definitely going to have very rough days ahead. The Duke's expression darkened. He reached for his dagger and asked angrily, "If you are disgusted by me?" Sheila's face was already full of fear. Ulysses glanced at her and thought to himself that she could not hold it in after all, but he was sure she would at least last until the wedding. He realized he might have underestimated her. Sheila quickly explained that she dodged his hand not because she was disgusted, but because she was on her period. She said it was bad luck for a man to touch menstrual blood, and that was why she reacted that way. Behind her polite smile, she was thinking to herself that this old man was clearly superstitious, so she might as well use it to her advantage and delay the wedding. The Duke smiled and asked if she truly meant she was on her period. She nodded and said of course it was true. Once her period was over, they could hold the wedding and she would serve his grace very well. The Duke lifted her chin and asked how he was supposed to know if she was telling the truth or just lying. He pointed the dagger at her. Everyone understood that if she was caught lying, the consequences would be even worse. Eugene looked genuinely worried for her. Sheila felt her heart pounding. This old man was much harder to fool than she thought. She glanced at Ulysses, wondering if he would help her at all, but from his expression she could tell he was actually waiting for her to get humiliated so he could look down on her. She knew she could not let that happen. So she took a deep breath and said if he wanted proof, then she would give him proof. She reached into her clothes and pulled out her padding, holding it up for him to see, while he was still pointing the dagger at her. Everyone was shocked. They all stared at her in silence and concluded that she was truly a crazy woman. Ulysses smirked to himself, thinking she was really going all out. The Duke immediately turned his face away and said he believed her and told her to get that unlucky thing out of his sight. Then he turned back to his wife and continued flirting as if nothing happened. Everyone could tell that she had cleared that hurdle. Sheila stood up and said she would take her leave. In her heart, she sighed a relief. She thought it was a good thing she had stuffed the bandage on her wound earlier. It had soaked up a lot of blood, and now it was very useful in deceiving the Duke. She returned to the dining area where the others were eating and sat down confidently, as if nothing had happened. She picked up a fork and started eating, and when she tasted the food, her eyes lit up and she began stuffing her mouth, shocked by how sweet and delicious it was. Ulysses sat there annoyed, thinking to himself that he could not believe she was eating so calmly after everything she just went through. The Duke suddenly called out to his children and told them to toast to their future stepmother and not make it look like they lacked manners. They all bowed to their father calmly. Eunice was the first to approach. She introduced herself warmly as Eunice, the eldest daughter. Sheila chuckled and said she hoped they would get along well. Eugene came next. He introduced himself politely and told her she could always reach out to him if she was confused about anything. Sheila thanked him and thought to herself that he did not seem bad at all. Besides, the real Clara had never spoken badly about him, so he might be a good ally. Then Ulysses approached. He raised his glass and toasted to her, congratulating her for winning their father's favor. He leaned closer and whispered in her ear, "Congratulations on successfully becoming a thorn in everyone's side." Sheila was confused and wondered what he meant by saying she had become a thorn in everyone's side. He told her that was exactly what it meant. She asked him to explain more clearly, saying she would be very grateful. The Duke, seeing them, asked why the two of them had come back together. Her lady bowed politely, explaining her carriage had gotten stuck in a snowdrift, and it was the young master who had saved her as he passed by. Ulysses supported her story, saying he just happened to be patrolling nearby. The Duke replied coldly, "I see, so it's literally one of those things that happened, and they say a hero saved a beauty. This man is so cunning." Sheila was shocked to hear him say that, but Ulysses added, "She's my father's future wife. I couldn't just watch her die." Her lady wondered if Duke Alcott would even believe all this. The Duke laughed, saying they shouldn't worry because he wasn't stingy. "Take this premium steak, for example," he said. "I'm more than happy to share it with everyone, but only on one condition: if I eat it first." This old man is the worst. His expression was sly as he added, "If anyone wants it, they'll have to take my leftovers." Sheila thought to herself that he was a disgusting creep. Not only did he compare his wives to food, but he was even willing to share them with his son. Ulysses sighed, telling his father to be reassured since he already knew the rules. Seeing how calm Ulysses remained, her lady realized he must be used to this, and it made her wonder if Duke Alcott's previous wives had all gone through the same treatment. She concluded that the whole family must be a bunch of perverts. She felt a pang of regret that she had even considered seducing him to team up with her. Now she was literally being treated like a steak to be divided up, so she knew she had to be on the defensive. The third son approached politely, his hands slightly trembling. He said, "I'm the third son. I feel like this one could be her boy at last. He's so cute and polite." Her lady smiled cheerfully, about to toast with him. He immediately drank, trembling, and before she knew it, he had turned and left, saying he was glad to have met her. Her lady thought to herself that Enoch seemed timid and didn't look like a pervert at all. Looking at the eldest son, she also noted he seemed polite and harmless. Finally, her eyes fell on Ulysses, and she wondered if the old geezer only shared his women with Ulysses. She was shocked at her own thoughts, and Ulysses wondered why she suddenly looked so surprised while staring at him. Half an hour later, the Duke asked his women to continue eating, but said he would be heading to his room. They all bowed, and the Duke immediately left. Ulysses announced he would be leaving too, and her lady couldn't help thinking that the old man gone and Ulysses leaving as well, they had shown zero respect for others. Eugene asked if he wasn't going to eat, and Ulysses replied that he was full. Her lady sighed, thinking it was actually a great opportunity. She should catch up with him and get him to explain what he meant earlier. She got up, telling everyone to take their time eating, and planned to head to her room to write a letter home announcing her arrival. I just hope she doesn't make it obvious by following Ulysses around. Eugene and Eunice watched her, and he said, "Safe travels." Sheila ran in after Ulysses and caught up to him. "Please wait, I want to talk about something," she begged. He sighed. "Why should I even listen to you?" She froze, but smiled, saying, "I like you. Please hear me out, so I won't have to cling to you obsessively. If His Grace the Duke finds out, I'd end up dying with him, and I'd willingly do so." This girl is really digging her own grave. She should stay away from him at this point. He glared at her, wondering if she was threatening him. He sighed, thinking he had 100 ways to make her disappear, but using her to mess with others might work. "Tag along," he said. "I'll tell you." She was excited. On the way, he reminded her about his father, a lecherous man who drinks, treats his wives like dirt, and his children even worse. Ulysses explained that he and his siblings were waiting for his father to kick the bucket so the ducal seat could open. Eugene might be first in line, but he was so sickly and weak that no one respected him. Every other contender was a real shark. Her lady noted that it's surprising how titles in Blizzard City are bubbling under the surface. He sighed, saying she represented the Priestley's family interest and that her arrival had temporarily united everyone else. He praised her, saying even as an outsider, she had shown that she could control her father, and with her looks, she could wrap him around her fingers and take charge of power in the family. He asked her what she intended to do. Would she team up with everyone and start with someone, or would she plan to take out the competition? So now it's really crazy. Ulysses has lived this life, but the life he lived there wasn't a fake Clara, it was the real one. But the confusing part is he even planning on changing anything? This manhwa is really something else and so interesting. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed this wild ride with Sheila and Ulysses. Stay tuned, subscribe, and like for more twists and surprises. See you in the next recap, besties. This is where this part of the story ends. If you love the story and you want us to continue, please comment the protagonist's name, Sheila.